أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Verse number 49. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ووضع الكتاب فترى المجرمين مشفقين مما فيه ويقولون يا ويلتنا ما لهذا الكتاب لا يغادر صغيرة ولا كبيرة إلا أحصاها ووجدوا ما عملوا حاضرا ولا يظلم ربك أحدا. And the book will be set up. Then you will see the guilty apprehensive of what is in it. They will say, woe to us! What a book is this! It omits nothing, big or small, without enumerating it. They will find present whatever they had done, and your Lord does not wrong anyone. Now this verse, of course, is the continuation of the previous verses which talked about the Day of Judgment after the world changes from dunya into akhirah. Now, it talks about one of the most critical moments of the plane of akhirah. We know that there are many, many different phases, and we pass through many different stages. It's just like stages that we have already passed through, from being, for example, a baby, grown up, died, and went into barzakh. These are stages. And when we are resurrected, again there are stages. And one of the most critical stages is when this book is set up. This book, which is the book of the whole human race, whatever they have done, which is actually a compilation of all individual books as well. So in this bigger book, everyone can see the reflection of their own book in this bigger book. So when this book is set and it is opened for, when we say opened, it means that it is manifested to them. They were in sort of, they were not seeing this book before. They hadn't reached this stage to see what is inside this huge book. Now that they have come to this stage, suddenly the veils are lifted and they see what is in this book in terms of their actions. Now, we know that every individual has a book tied, so to speak, to his or her neck, as we have in Surah Al-Isra. وَكُلَّ إِنسَانٍ أَلْزَمْنَاهُ طَائِرَهُ فِي أُنُقِهِ وَنُخْرِجُ لَهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ كِتَابًا يَلْقَاهُ مَنْشُورًا. Every individual human being, we have tied his omen. Omen is the act of a person. The Quran is very much emphatic to say that there is no good omen or bad omen except your acts. Your actions are your omens. So your omens are tied to your neck, but you don't see it now. You don't realize that what you have done has actually an influence on your future. Then on the Day of Judgment, we open that book. It is now closed. وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يَلْقَاهُ كِتَابًا. On the Day of Judgment, he will see it as a book opened for him to read. And we tell him, اقرأ كتابك. Now read your book. كَفَى بِنَفْسِكَ الْيَوْمَ عَلَيْكَ حَسِيبًا. You are sufficient today to count and to judge, to count your acts and to judge yourself. Now, that book is with us. When we are resurrected, to some extent, we become aware of it. However, the full implications of our acts are seen in this book. Not rather implications of our acts, as some exegetes believe. This is a trend of exegesis in many Shia and Sunni commentators. We say it is not something written there. It is the acts that we see there themselves. The acts are preserved and are in this book. It's called book because it has now been compiled in an orderly way, our actions. And then every individual would see their acts in this book. So the criminals, the guilty, when they see, of course, they become terrified. Now, what do we see in this book? For example, we have lived a life of piety, for example. We have prayed, we have fasted, we have given charity, we have humbled ourselves before Allah. What do we see there are not the prayers and fasts and such things. It's a different thing. Or we have led a life of evil conduct. For example, we have done all sorts of evil. What do we see there is not, for example, lying or killing or plundering. It's not these things that we see. These may not be very much terrifying or very much pleasing. What we see is the manifestation of these, or the way these acts have changed and have found a form, have found a substance which is suitable to that world, to that realm of existence. And that, if the acts are not good, if the acts are evil, that shape, that form, that existence is terrifying, is horrible. When the people see it, just the mere fact of having a glance of it, putting gaze on it, would terrify the people. That's why it says, وَوُضْعَ الْكِتَابِ فَتَرَى الْمُجْرِمِينَ مُشْفِقِينَ مِمَّا فِيهِ. You see that they are terrified from whatever is in it. They may before remember what they have done, but they are not terrified. Of course, when we die, we remember many things that we have done in this world, but we are not terrified. When we see the reality of that in this book, and that is the stage. A stage we have reached when we see the reality of what we have done, whether good or bad. Of course, for the good people, it's quite pleasing, very pleasing to see how they have changed. They have become paradise themselves. And for the guilty, they have become hell. The acts themselves have changed form in that way. They are preserved. The idea of book wants to tell us that about that preservation. They have been preserved, recorded, and then you see them. Maybe we do not see the evil of what we do in terms of bad acts in this world. As the Quran says, you do not see it. You will see it later. وَبَدَى لَهُمْ سَيِّئَاتِ مَا كَسَبُوا. The evil of what they did would appear for them. Now, we may, for example, reject the idea of God in this world. There's nothing wrong with it. There is no evil shape for it. But when we go to that world, an evil shape of this opinion would be shown to us and is attached to us, actually, if we are the rejectors. Or, for example, if we wrong people, if we do dhulm, that dhulm may not seem very terrifying for us in this world. Of course, for the conscientious people, it is terrifying, but sometimes we lose our conscience at all, completely, and we are not feeling any pain about doing wrong to others. Then when we go there, that wrong has an evil attached to it, which only manifests itself in this book. And that is why it says, and the book will be set up, then you will see the guilty apprehensive of what is in it. Apprehensive, mushfiq. Shafaqa, we have talked before. Shafaqa is a type of fear which is mixed with love, because everyone loves themselves. Everyone is concerned about their own selves. And now they see the evil of their acts there, and they know that they are coming upon it. So there is this ishfaq, they fear that what is now going to happen? This book has recorded my acts, and it has changed form in this way, and it's going to come back to me now. This ishfaq is for it. So you will see the guilty apprehensive of what is in it. Now, notice the term guilty. The guilty are afraid of that book. The believers, the people of good conduct, they are not afraid because whatever they see in that book is very pleasurable. يَقُولُونَ يَا وَيْلَتَنَا. They say, woe to us. Wail means destruction, means to perish. And when we see something quite terrifying, you may say, oh, may have I been perished not seeing this. I wish I had died not seeing this. That's why they say, Ya waylana. Ya waylana means we wish that we did not exist to see this. Ya waylana. Ma li hadha al-kitab. What type of book is this? This is something which surprises everyone, because every word uttered, every act performed, every intention of the heart, they're all there. That's why I say, لا يغادر صغيرة ولا كبيرة. Now, of course, صغيرة ولا كبيرة are two adjectives which go back to a word which is omitted because we know لا يغادر خطيئة صغيرة ولا كبيرة. No big sin, no small sin. It's there. Now, the guilty, of course, talk about sin. But for believers, of course, when there is no sin, or the sins are forgiven, maghfirah has come, they don't see any evil there or saghira or kabira there. لا يغادر صغيرة ولا كبيرة إلا أحصاها. It has actually brought that, enumerated everything in this book, has come together. As I said, before this stage, we have lots of different stages that we go through after we are resurrected. However, we haven't come yet before this to a stage where the contents of this book is revealed to us. When the contents of this book is revealed to us, then this situation would happen, and these feelings for the guilty and good feelings, of course, for good people. وَوَجَدُوا مَا عَمِلُوا حَاضِرًا. They find whatever they have done present. Now, many exegetes say that it means that they find whatever they have done recorded, but the verse doesn't say this. It says their very acts are present there. And this is what gives more sense, because as we said, the punishment or reward on the Day of Judgment is not conventional. It's not that because you have done this, I will punish you, or because you have done this, I will reward you. No, it is the very act itself which is attached to us, which makes our punishment or makes our reward. So, وَوَجَدُوا مَا عَمِلُوا حَاضِرًا. They find whatever they have done present. Allah preserves everything. إِنَّا نَحْنُ نُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى وَنَكْتُبُ مَا قَدَّمُوا وَآثَارَهُم. We discussed this in Tafsir of Surah Yasin, that whatever they have done, they have sent forth, whatever was done after them, because of them, as a consequence of their acts, they are all recorded. The very acts are recorded. There is no point of writing things, of course, or recording the way we record things, because, as I said, judgment is just to give whatever you have done back to you, not to punish or reward because of what you have done. إِنَّ هَذَا مَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ, as we have in other verses. This is what you used to do. Take it. So the verse in Surah Isra as well finds its place now. كَفَى بِنَفْسِكَ الْيَوْمَ عَلَيْكَ حَسِيبًا. You will judge yourself. In fact, your acts would come back to you, and you will be your own judge. And also the following sentence, the last sentence in the verse, وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. And your Lord would not wrong anyone. Because if punishment is conventional, then there is this idea of why God, for example, for certain act, why this severe punishment would come, or why such punishment for such acts, if it is a sort of convention. But if it is what we have done coming back to us, then there is no wrongdoing. There is no dhulm. وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. Not only there is no dhulm, but as much as possible, Allah will forgive and would remove these acts, would somehow either cover them up or would completely destroy the consequences of our evil acts so that they do not come back to us anymore. And this is why we always need the mercy, the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Forgiveness, again, if we look into this context of actions coming back to us, forgiveness, again, is not a conventional thing. Forgiveness means that God would take away the evil consequences of what you do. And this is the meaning of غفران. غفران لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير means that Allah would actually take away what wrong they have done. So in this book, the believers are not going to see their evil acts, their sins, because Allah has already removed them. Because Allah, when we say forgiven, means they are removed. When they are removed, you don't see them. It's only the mujrimun, the guilty, and guilty not in the sense of, for example, a believer sometimes commits a sin or guilt. No, mujrim is someone who has a habit of continuously doing crimes. So someone who was continuously guilty in this world, so they will be, of course, very apprehensive, afraid of what they see in this book, and they are amazed from the creation of Allah, the power of God. What sort of book is this? It was not imaginable at all that this is going to be seen. وَبَدَى لَهُمْ, as we have in other verse, بَدَى لَهُمْ سَيِّئَاتِ مَا كَسَبُوا وَبَدَى لَهُمْ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَمْ يَكُونُوا يَحْتَسِبُونَ. These are in two different separate verses. First of all, the evil of what they do will appear there for them, and they see something from Allah that they never would have estimated. They never would have expected that God has actually brought all these together for them and is giving it back to them. Now, if we think about it systematically, this is a blessing of Allah, because Allah has created us here to do certain acts, and then He would, without diminishing anything, give them back to us and adds to them. Man ja'a bil hasana falahu ashru amthalaha. Whoever comes with good, 10 times we give. In fact, you take one good act, it changes form, it becomes something very pleasurable, and then God would increase that 10 times. This is the philosophy of this book. The philosophy of this book is not to terrify people. The philosophy of this book is not to punish people. The philosophy is just like the philosophy of this life. We have come to this life to use the blessings of God, to grow, to go towards perfection. It's all in a sort of systematic direction towards growth. However, because we have free will, then certain people are left behind. Certain people use it against themselves. They wrong themselves, actually. وَلَكِنْ كَانُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ يَظْلِمُونَ. They wrong themselves in this system of blessing of Allah. Now, the whole idea of the book is this: to take people towards their growth, towards the neighborhood of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, for those who are left behind, then this is going to be terrifying. Life, you see, this life, for example, we use the blessings of this life in the best way possible that we can, but some people use it to, for example, shed blood, use it to wrong others. This is, of course, something which would harm them more than anyone else. There's one very interesting point in this verse. For those of you who can read Arabic, if you look at your Quran in the Osmani script, if your Quran has the Uthmani script. Here, when they say يقولون يا ويلتنا ما لهذا الكتاب, you see the lam is not attached to هذا. Has anyone have it in their book? Yeah, you see, the lam is not attached to هذا. ما لهذا الكتاب. Now, of course, this is against the Rasmul Khat. This lam should have been attached here. Now, we have several other instances of this sort of inconsistency in writing in the Uthmani script. And of course, this is from the real Uthmani script. This Uthmani, when we say Uthmani script, means the scribe, who was Uthman something, in recent centuries, but it goes back to the Uthmani writing of the Quran when they actually unified the whole writings of the Quran. And we have this inconsistency. For example, in certain places, lahada has been written attached, and in certain places it's written detached. Or for example, we have this aid, which is yad. In certain places it is written with one ya, in certain places it's written with two ya. For example, in Surah Zariyat, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ is written with two ya. Now, here, of course, the majority say that this is inconsistency is because of the mistake of the scribes at the time of Uthman. You know that there wasn't one scribe. Of course, there were several scribes writing these copies, unified copies, sending it to different areas. And in certain places, they write the way they used to write. And in certain places, they followed the systematic sort of writing. And therefore, we have this inconsistency here. Lahada, for example, lam detached from hada. Now, some exegetes say that this is not mistake or inconsistency. This is actually to make a point. For example, in Surah Zariyat, when they wrote, and this is because of circumstantial evidence they had, when they wrote وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ with two ya, they wanted to stress the power of Allah. They write two ya to stress the power. Here, when they write مَا لِهَذَا الْكِتَابِ, there is an exegete called Baqai of the 10th century, a Lebanese exegete. He says that this is because when they see this book, they cannot talk and they start to somehow stutter. They say, مَا لِهَذَا الْكِتَابِ. That's why they wrote it separately. Now, of course, these are just justifications which have no proof. It is just to explain away why this is like that. When Uthman actually saw this handwriting himself, when the books presented to him, the Qur'ans, he saw these mistakes there. And then he said, yes, you have done a good job, but there are certain things that later on people would correct it. And maybe this was something good or something bad, I don't know. But later on, the good thing that Muslims did, and this is very important, they did not correct these, just to show the way they were written. And this actually adds to the authenticity of the book, isn't it? I mean, even if a mistake was there in writing, they preserved it the way it was. And therefore, any Quran you see, from the oldest Quran you see up to the Quran, unfortunately, of course, recently in some countries, they have started to correct these mistakes and writing it differently, which is a very, very bad thing to do. It is good to preserve it the way it was written, to show, actually, it adds to the authenticity and shows that how meticulous the Muslims were to preserve the Quran the way it was written, even if there was a mistake in handwriting there, they preserved it. And we have probably a dozen of these sort of writing mistakes or inconsistencies. We cannot say mistake because it's a form of writing. Inconsistencies in the Quran, which actually adds to the value of the original script in the sense that not adds to the value of the scribes who made the mistake, but adds to the value of the original copies, because it shows how accurate Muslims wanted to follow the script which was written. Anyhow, this was one point mentioned by Baqai in this verse. After talking about, of course, the consequences of our acts and what will happen in the Day of Judgment, all these are actually somehow connected to us listening to the whispers of shaitan. Had we not done that, then of course we wouldn't have faced such a dire consequence on the Day of Judgment. So it somehow digresses to mention something in passing about the shaitan and the beginning of human creation, then the way shaitan faced that, and how human beings are treating shaitan. Verse number 50, وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ كَانَ مِنَ الْجِنِّ فَفَسَقَ عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهِ أَفَتَتَّخِذُونَهُ وَذُرِّيَّتَهُ أَوْلِيَاءَ مِنْ دُونِي وَهُمْ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ بِئْسَ لِلظَّالِمِينَ بَدَلًا. And when we said to the angels, prostrate before Adam, they prostrated, but not Iblis. He was one of the jinn, so he transgressed against his Lord's command. Will you then take him and his offspring for guardians in my stead, though they are your enemies? How evil a substitute for the wrongdoers. Now here is first of all, the first thing that we have to pay attention in this verse. There are, of course, a couple of issues that we have to discuss in this verse. The first thing is this idea of wilaya to shaitan. أَفَتَتَّخِذُونَهُ وَذُرِّيَّتَهُ أَوْلِيَاءَ مِنْ دُونِي. Do you take shaitan and his offspring as awliya, as guardians? In fact, you go under the wilaya of shaitan. Now, what's the meaning of wilaya? And how are we actually under the wilaya of shaitan rather than wilaya of Allah? أَفَتَتَّخِذُونَهُ وَذُرِّيَّتُهُ أَوْلِيَاءَ مِنْ دُونِي means you have to be under my wilaya, under my whatever wilaya, I mean guardianship or whatever. Rather, instead of being under my wilaya, you go under the wilaya of shaitan. Is this the way you have to behave while he is your enemy? And while you know that he wants to harm you, still you follow the wilaya of shaitan. Now, wilaya, of course, may have many different meanings. Wilaya is sort of attachment. And therefore, a wali is someone who's attached to his wali, because both sides are wali. When two people are together, both of them are called wali of each other. Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu. Allah is the wali, and we, if we are good believers, we are awliya Allah as well, isn't it? So both sides are called wali. Now, so wilaya is a sort of attachment. Now, this attachment may be for different reasons. One reason is that you follow someone. This is the wilaya in obedience. Wilaya in obedience. This is the type of wilaya we believe in for our Aimma alayhim salam. That we have the wilaya is different from mahabba and love and something like that. Wilaya, of course, the only wilaya belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu huwal wali. The only wali is Allah. That is the only person whom you should obey. If wilaya is, we take it as meaning of obedience. It has other meanings I will mention later on. So, obedience is only due to Allah. However, Allah has actually appointed certain people because we are not in direct contact with Allah to obey Him, okay, has appointed certain people, has talked to them, and has appointed them as His representative to be obeyed. And this is the meaning of Khalifatullah. When we say the Prophet is Khalifatullah or A'immah Khulafaullah, means that they are actually acting as representative of God. Whatever they say is the word of God, and therefore, if we follow them, we are under Wilayatullah. And when we say, for example, we have to have Wilayatul A'imma or Wilayat of the Prophet, it all goes back to Wilayatullah. Because in the Quran it says, Man yuti ar-Rasul faqad ata Allah. Whoever obeys the messenger has obeyed God. That means Wilayatul Rasul is Wilayatullah. And in the same way, because A'imma are actually substitutes of the Prophet or successors of the Prophet, whoever obeys them has obeyed Allah. So Wilaya only belongs to God. Now Allah tells us, you have to come under my Wilaya. I am the one who is your wali, no one else. And if you deviate in this, of course you have gone wrong way. Now, Wilayat al-Shaitan in this context would mean that we obey Shaitan rather than obeying Allah. And Shaitan is not only the hidden Shaitan, not only Iblis, for example. In the Quran, we have Shayateen al-Insa wal-Jinn. Shayateen, the devils who are from human beings and who are from jinn. Now, human beings, of course, they advise us openly. They advise us, for example, not to believe in God. This is Shaitan. They advise us to do evil. This is Shaitan. They advise us to act opposite of what Allah has mentioned. Again, this is Wilayatul Shaitan. The jinn, who are the offsprings of Iblis, as is mentioned here, whisper to us. Actually, it is not something seen, it's a whisper. In the same way, now this is very, very important, in the same way that Prophet has no power of compelling us to do what we have to do. When I say Prophet, I mean Wilayatullah. This is Wilayatullah, okay? In the same way that the Prophet has no power to compel us to do, when he says, for example, you have to follow this path, you have to do this, exactly in the same way, Shaitan and Iblis have no power to compel us. It's just the way we inclined. We obey because we like to obey. We obey the Prophet because we like to obey the Prophet and because we think it's beneficial. Others may obey and listen to those whispers because they think that it is good to do it. And therefore, as the Quran says about the Prophet, وَمَا أَنْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ بِجَبَّارٍ, you cannot compel anyone to believe. It's the same thing about Iblis. Iblis cannot compel anyone to do anything wrong. The origin is all in ourselves. Now, if we take awliya, meaning that's in the sense of wilaya, obedience, is very clear. Now, in the past, people used to worship jinn as well, or to sacrifice for them, in the fear that they may harm them or in the hope that they may benefit them. And many of those idols were actually manifestations of angels and jinns as well. Now, wilaya also means wilaya to tadbir, management. Some may think that management of this world may be in hands of others, and that's why they offer their worship to them. If we take it wilaya to tadbir, management, again, management is with Allah. Allahu huwa al-wali, Allah is the only wali in management, in obedience, and everything, and therefore you should not offer your worship to anyone else because they are not worthy of worship, especially these jinn and shayateen, which unfortunately in our modern world we see many people are inclined towards doing that actually. And this is ironic. In the age of science, people are trying to are inclined to do such things, eventually they are going to harm you because they are your enemy, and you take them as your wali. So, أَفَتَتَّخِذُونَهُ وَذُرِّيَّتَهُ أَوْلِيَاءَ مِن دُونِي is a rhetorical question. Is this right to do? Is this something which your reason would tell you to do, rather than obeying me, obeying them? And here a question may come, okay, how should we know that we are obeying them? How should we know that what comes to our mind is a whisper of shaitan, for example? Because shaitan, the only thing they do, the shayateen, they create ideas in your mind, concepts. And these ideas generate actions. And if we give much value to these ideas, which nowadays it is given, whatever people desire and love to do, let them do, it's good. So if we give much value to these ideas which are put in our mind by their whisper, then of course we deviate. Now, how should we know whether we are following, deviating, or we are not? Now, there is a very good framework here, and that is the hawa, or those desires and ideas which come to our mind. The hawa is something that every human being has. But this hawa should be in the framework of the scripture. If it is inside that framework, inside that box, then we are not following shaitan. وَمَنْ أَرَلُّ مِمَّنِ اتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ بِغَيْرِ هُدًى مِنَ اللَّهِ. Who is more deviated from the one who follows his hawa without any guidance from Allah? So if you follow your hawa inside this box of a scripture, inside the box of Sharia, then of course it's obedience of Allah. Because everyone would like to follow their desires, but if you put it in this box, then it is obedience of Allah. If you move outside this box, then it is obedience of shaitan. So this is a very clear-cut criterion here. وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لَآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ كَانَ مِنَ الْجِنِّ. He was one of the jinn, and that is why he transgressed against his Lord. Now we have lots of discussions here that inshallah we have to leave for our next session. وَصَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِهِ الطَّاهِرِينَ.
Thank you very much, Shaykh. So brothers and sisters, we have about 15-20 minutes to further the discussion and increase the knowledge. So can we start with either brothers or sisters, whoever is ready? Any brothers or sisters? Riyad, yeah, please take the mic.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. Just sticking to the first ayat, the Wazal Kitab Fatar al-Mujrimin Mushkin. How does Islam look at the stages of man? Because when I think back to when I was 16, I was 18, I might have been baligh, but I might have said something to somebody whom then I later regret. Now, the person passes away and I don't make amends with him. So somebody dies without me having to say sorry. So I have then violated the haqq of the person around me. So I cannot do anything but istighfar for that, yes? Now, what will happen as this ayat says, is that things will be made clear to you. So there are two problems for me. One is that everything I've done will suddenly, my memory will then be 100 times better than it is now. Because I have difficulty thinking about what I did when I was 18, the exact words. I said to somebody, you're just going to go and cry all night, So that was, we were talking about religion and Muharram at the time. So it was an overreaction typical from somebody who's 18 years old. Okay? So I'm not saying that I did the right thing, but then later on I didn't meet the person and he dies away. So I feel guilty that I've done something that hurt something. Now I'm hoping that will not increase 100-fold. Or 10-fold for a start. But how do I rectify this? Because istighfar has its place. I have my relationship with God. But I have wronged a person. And I have not been able to correct that. Okay? So yes, the advice is, yes, correct whatever you think might have gone wrong, start today, make amends with people that you have wronged. I understand that. But for what's gone past, I have a problem now reconciling. So what do the Shias believe in, that if you wrong a person, does that then remain like a blip on your record, and that's exactly what's going to be pulled up on the Day of Judgment, and I will remember exactly what I said? So that will only make me more resentful of what I said, of course. But how do I rectify that within myself? Because it's now the time is gone. I can't do anything about it.
You know, interestingly, we have in Hadith that some people, when their books are given to them, because after seeing this book, then every individual receives an individual book, and they go away with that book. They go to wherever they have to go, which is somehow the chapter of this book about them. They take it. It's with them already, but they see it now. Now, some people, when they open their book, of course, it's a metaphorical language, they say, this is not my book. I did lots of things which are not here. And of course, he's told, no, God has removed them for you. They are not there anymore. As I said, it's the criminals who should be afraid of that. And the sign of being a criminal or non-criminal is where your book comes from. Because the books are kept in different chapters of this huge book, your books, okay? Right side or hand, left side. فَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ بِيَمِينِهِ. If the book comes from right side, then nothing is in it which would terrify you. Nothing which would actually gives you a bad feeling at all. And when he opens it, he's so excited, and he does not believe that this is him. He says, وَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ بِيَمِينِهِ فَيَقُولُ هَاؤُمُ اقْرَءُوا كِتَابِيَهْ. He wants to show his book to everyone. Look, this is me. Or he himself doesn't believe, actually. But, of course, there was one thing. إِنِّي ظَنَنْتُ أَنِّي مُلَاقٍ حِسَابِيَهْ. I was fearful of this, but now there is no fear. The fear is gone. وَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ بِشِمَالِهِ. If the book comes from the left side, that's سجين. We have كَلَّا إِنَّ كِتَابَ الْأَبْرَارِ لَفِي إِلِّيِّينَ كَلَّا إِنَّ كِتَابَ الْفُجَّارِ لَفِي سجين. Okay? If it comes from سجين, which is the place to preserve evil, then of course, when it comes, it is terrible. وَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ بِشِمَالِهِ فَيَقُولُ يَا لَيْتَنِي لَمْ أُوتَ كِتَابِيَهْ. I hope I was not given the book. وَلَمْ أَدْرِ مَا حِسَابِيَهْ. I didn't know about hisab or whatever. So yes, it is removed. Allah will clarify, would clear the book from all these evils. And it is, of course, the result of istighfar. Istighfar is very, very important. It is so important that you see in many places of the Quran, Allah advises His Prophet to do istighfar, isn't it? Now, some of us think that this is for ordinary sins, that we do, for example, and Allah says to the Prophet, you astaghfir li dhanbik. No. Now, you have done certain things. You say, I have done something wrong with regards to a person. I can't do anything else about it. What about God? You worship God, but you had an idea of God which was not as clear as you have. Now you have a clearer idea of God, and you worship God with a different type of experience. And when you look back, you see, well, you wronged God before. By the way you looked, you thought, you worshipped. And this needs istighfar as well. And one of the things about the Prophet is that, of course, his knowledge increased day after day. وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. So when he looks back, he thinks that, wow, God, what a wrongdoer I was, praising you in that way. So this istighfar is for everyone, especially those who go closer and closer to God. They do more istighfar than those who are far away from Him.
Thank you. Any sisters? Yeah. Let's pass.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum salam.
You mentioned that Iblis whispers to us certain thoughts, and that's what then makes us go ahead and sin. And this is something which I have a bit of difficulty understanding, this concept of Iblis. Do we believe that he actually places thoughts in our mind, or is it that these thoughts come from ourselves?
The origin of thoughts come from ourselves, but it is somehow embellished. We are encouraged to do that. You see, when a person is used to evil, okay, is used to do wrong things, the ideas that come to his mind or her mind is always evil, the same thing, just reinforces itself. A person who is good, the ideas which come to their mind always reinforce itself. Yes, many a time the ideas are placed in our minds by Iblis. Not that he creates the ideas, he whispers in a way that we somehow tend to think in that way. وَإِنَّهُمْ, as the Quran said, لَيَصُدُّونَهُمْ عَنِ السَّبِيلِ وَيَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. They bar them from the right path, and they think that they know. They think that, yeah, they are quite guided. These are the ideas coming from themselves. They want to do it. So one of the things that we have always be careful, as the Quran says, even to the Prophet, وَقُلْ رَبِّ أَعُوذُ بِكَ مِنْ هَمَزَاتِ الشَّيَاطِينِ. I seek refuge to you, in you from spurs of shaitan. Something that he motivates. These motivations are the most dangerous things. Motivates, for example, someone has wronged you, motivates you to retaliate. The initial idea is from you, that yes, I have to do something, I have to do something about it. Well, you can do many things. You can forgive, for example. You can do something about it, forgive. You can do something about it to somehow teach them a lesson by doing good to them, okay? But you can also retaliate. Now, this idea of retaliation, he spurs it, he motivates it. Yes, you have to do it. Don't you have any, for example, sense of justice? Don't you have such and such? So there are certain ideas which we think about them because of our past evil record, or certain ideas that we think about them because of our past good record. Why the modern society has come to this situation? Why all values are upside down now? Well, they have shed lots of blood in the past couple of centuries. It comes, you see, when you see the consequences of your actions in this way.
Thank you. Brothers? Is that right? I can take the mic, please.
I might be misinterpreting, but paraphrasing what you said, am I right in understanding what you said, that whatever good or bad I do, this my own personal book or the attachment takes note of all the consequential impact that it has. So if I do some good today, the impact of that over years or horizontally, if I do something good to him, what he does something to somebody else, all that is recorded. Then my worry is that one good may later on down the line lead to lots of bad things, and vice versa. Doing a bad thing now, Prophet Khizr is an example, might prevent more. Okay, so Prophet Khizr's example, he killed a man, he killed a boy, because of the consequence that he knew about, but Hazrat Musa didn't know. So on the same basis, to do something bad might prevent something much more evil later on. Might. But similarly, but my more worry is that I don't know, that Allah knows best. But my worry is that if I do something good, if I help an individual, say, let's give you an example of this coming elections. I help.
David Cameron to come as Prime Minister. Okay.
Okay, I participate in a political process. I was thinking more of the Hero Mosque. Participate in a local process, get somebody elected, but he then does something bad. Am I responsible? Is it in my book as well?
It depends. It depends on your intentions. It depends on the scope of your knowledge, your understanding. So, for example, of course, the Prophet wrote this religion of Islam, but in his name, the caliphs did lots of wrong, and Yazid in his name killed Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Is he going to be responsible? No, of course. You know, the good, if it's done with good intention, and if it is a real good, it would somehow, it may be mixed with evil and bad things for a while, but eventually it shows its fruits. Like religion, I mean, Islam, for example. You see how the history of Islam has come down, I mean, mixed with all sorts of atrocities, bloodshed, vengeance and such things. But eventually what has happened is that there is a book of guidance which people can read and are guided. So the good is there, has remained. And those evildoers are responsible for their own acts, because this was not the intention of the Prophet. In the same way, if our intention is not those evil consequences, and we do it with good heart, then of course only the good of it come back to us. The bad of it wouldn't come back to us, because we were not responsible for that. The amazement about this book is that it doesn't only record the acts or such things. No, the intentions, the degree of ikhlas, the degree of evil, everything is there. So it is an amazing book which is mentioned here.
Thank you. Any sisters before we come back to brothers? Any sister? No? Okay, Jamil, bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum. This thing you mentioned about the shaitan and the zuriya of the shaitan. You said the children of shaitan. So children, that means shaitan has lots of family and children and everything else. Presumably wife, kids, and the kids and kids. Is this how it supposed to see?
If shaitan is from jinn, of course, yes. Jinn procreate in the same way as, not in the same way, but they procreate as we procreate.
But we die. Do they die as well?
Yeah, of course they die.
So shaitan's, the original one, he's dead presumably, then there's children around.
No, he's not dead. He has a long life, longer than other jinns. Okay, he has asked for it. قال رب أنذرني إلى يوم يبعثون. Give me time until they are resurrected. Okay, but of course Allah did not accept wholly, but accepted partially. قال إنك من المنذرين إلى يوم الوقت المعلوم. Until a time that I do not reveal to you. You will live until a time I do not reveal to you, and we don't know when that time is, and therefore he is a jinn. He will die. He will be resurrected. However, he has a very long life, and usually jinn have longer lives than we have, much longer, 10 times, 20 times of.
So he's still alive, this particular one, because it was a few years ago, yeah. That's when he originally. He didn't prostrate to the Adam, yeah?
I don't remember.
Thank you. Any sisters? Any sisters? No? Just brother.
Assalamu alaikum. You mentioned about the changing with forgiveness, the change of evil deeds into good ones. In the Surah Furqan, it says the God changes evil deeds to good deeds. Is this the meaning in the Surah Furqan? Is the same meaning that you are saying?
Yes.
With the forgiveness and good deeds.
Yes.
So this is
repentance actually even changes sometimes the bad deeds to good deeds. Sometimes bad deeds are washed away by good deeds. There's not one standard rule, okay? إِنَّ الْحَسَنَاتِ يُذْهِبْنَ السَّيِّئَاتِ. Sometimes you do a good deed, bad deeds are washed away from your book. They are not there anymore, for example. Sometimes, for example, a real repentance, a deep regret, may change whatever we have done in the past to good. This is especially about the mushrikun who did not believe in God. They did lots of good things, okay? But it was all in vain because they did not believe in God. They were mushrik, they worshipped idols. Now that they repented and they did things for Allah, Allah says, I do not destroy them for you. I just change them to good deeds. That أُولَٰئِكَ يُبَدِّلُ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ حَسَنَاتٍ. Their sayyat is turned into hasanat. Now, is this only for them, for those who convert, or is even for those who are Muslims, for example, and they have done certain evil things and then they regret at a certain point? Probably, because this is a general statement. أُولَٰئِكَ يُبَدِّلُ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ حَسَنَاتٍ. And in Surah Furqan, when this verse is mentioned, it actually talks before that about very grave sins that they have committed. Shirk, killing, bloodshed. All is changed after a deep regret. Now, it means that Allah is waiting for an opportunity to somehow change our destiny from bad to good, the destiny which we actually write for themselves. And that is out of His mercy again, yes.
Thank you. Back to the sisters here. Any sister? No? Mahbub? Yes.
Sheikh, when is which is the day of judgment? I mean, is it the day it says in the Yasin will come suddenly, or is it the day after everyone has been dead and risen up? Or which is the day of judgment?
You see, the stages are roughly like this. First, everyone on the earth will die. And then comes that great blast. Or maybe when that great blast comes, still there are some people living on the earth and they die at the same time. And with that blast, the souls who are in Barzakh would die as well. They go unconscious. And the angels would die as well. And death, of course, there has a different meaning, because here death means transfer of the soul from this place to another place. There, death means that the soul itself would go completely unconscious. It's a blackout completely of consciousness for everyone in this world. And then after this blast has come and every soul is dead, the world starts to evolve. The universe starts to evolve. Now, of course, all these planets, galaxies are created that we think that why God has created all these when there is no living being, or even if there's living being, very scarcely. I mean, look, inside our galaxy, we haven't found any planet which probably is habitable, or inside our solar system, we haven't found anything. So what is the purpose of all this? Now, of course, رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. You have not created this in vain. This is going to evolve one day to something which we would understand the wisdom behind this huge creation. So it evolves. After everything is ready, after the dunya is changed into akhirah, then the souls go back to their bodies, which are cloned for them, and they are resurrected. Now, that is the start of that day, which we call the day of judgment. It's not day in the sense of one day. It's a long, long process. It's much longer than the life that we have in this world. As our life in this world is much longer than the life we had in the womb, and as the life that we have in Barzakh is much longer than the life we had in this world, the life which we have on that day is very long. And then, of course, we go through all these stages, and each stage has its own qualities, features, and then comes that final judgment when everyone is placed in the place that they deserve.
Thank you, sisters. Yep.
Following the box of Sharia, do you mean the letter of law? Because the letter of law is not a straight jacket. So if I'm worried that if I have to pray qasr and I pray full, will that also be manifested?
No, you see, it's not only Sharia. I mean, I don't talk about law only. I talk about more than law. The ideas, the concepts, the values, these are very important. The way we have to treat other people, the way we have to treat Allah, the way we have to be humble towards Him. These are all, of course, in the box of Sharia. By Sharia, I don't mean only law. I mean the whole system of faith, the belief system. But yes, of course, about the law, what we have today is something which is based on our estimation of law, isn't it? We believe that this is the way we have to behave. And that's enough. You see, what Allah wants from you is obedience. Now, for example, if I believe that I should pray qasr wrongly, okay, but I am obedient in this, that's enough. That obedience is important. If it transpires later on that I was wrong, God is not going to punish me because I believe that I was obedient. And therefore, we shouldn't be worried about these technical issues. Leave these to mujtahideen, they decide, and we follow one of them. God will punish them. Why should punish us? This is what they say. They say, you actually put your responsibility on their shoulder. Now, if they have not issued fatwa based on certain scruples, based on their real effort, then they are responsible, yes. The mujtahidun that we know now, of course, they are quite concerned about the way they issue a fatwa. Of course, nowadays we have some young people who issue fatwas. Now they are responsible for it. If someone follows them, they are responsible for it because they haven't exerted effort to find out. They just talk about their own opinions. But for mujtahidun, no. And this is why in many traditions we have that this position of fatwa is a very, very sensitive and dangerous position. And in some of our ulama have composed poetries about this farr min al-futya firaran min asad. Like you run away, escape from a lion, run away from issuing fatwa. Because then you are responsible. Now about these Saudis who issue fatwa, these young chaps who daily issue fatwa, what God does to them, these boys are going and are killed and kill people based on their fatwa. What Allah does to them is, I don't know. But for us, of course, who follow mujtahidun, if we follow a marja, then we shouldn't be worried about it.
Thank you. We'll take one from the sister here. It's on. It is on.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Yes.
Can we go back to the question of the judgment and what happens after you die? Can you also enlighten us, please, about what the sources are from which we derive our information about this day of judgment and then the sequence of events and the rest of it?
It's mainly the Quran, of course, but of course the elaboration of that comes in hadith. Of course, we cannot 100% rely on traditions and narrations, but the Quran is very reliable. And the Quran has talked profusely about that day, about the stages of that day. And then, of course, places where we do not understand very well or is a bit complicated, the hadith explains it for us. So it's all from that source. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you make it the last one from either brother or sister? Brother, sister? Okay, then I'll make a last one if you don't mind. We were discussing about the scribes making mistakes in writing. First of all, if they made a mistake... Not
mistakes, they actually wrote it in their own style sometimes. In their own style.
So they are not mistakes. So now we are saying that allegedly they're trying to correct it.
Yes.
So why are they trying to correct it?
Because it is not consistent with our style of writing. it's not consistent with that.
I see. So then, even though they wrote it in the way they were writing,
Yeah.
it didn't change the meaning at all.
Yeah, and also why they want to correct it, because it's not consistent. In one place they have written, for example, Eid with one ya, in another they have written it with two. In one instance they have omitted an alif, for example, in Surah Sabah. وَالَّذِينَ سَعَوْا فِي آيَاتِنَا. This sa'aw should have an alif at the end. They have dropped it. Now, yeah, especially this in Surah Sabah is very conspicuous. Now, you know, for me, when I look at it, my sort of belief in the authenticity of the Quran intensifies rather than diminishes, because I see that, yes, this was omitted. Of course, when we write, I mean, imagine they wrote a whole book, and it is quite conceivable that they may have dropped one alif, okay? But that is despite all exegetes focusing on that, saying why this alif is not here, but they have preserved it the way it was. So it is very reassuring that, yes, everyone did used to pay attention to this writing, to every letter of it, and then they discussed why this alif is not there, even if the scribe may have just forgotten to put that alif, and they have tried to find justifications for it. This reassures a person that, yes, this is very, very authentic, this writing.
Because we believe that before the Quran went for a wider distribution, it was actually verified by Imam Ali alayhi salam, and so Imam Ali also let it go like that.
Actually, what was done at the time of Uthman was with the unanimous agreement. Well, not unanimous, because Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was not agreeing with that, but the whole companions of the Prophet who were experts in the Quran. Not every companion was expert, of course. Like Ubay ibn Ka'b, like Ali ibn Abi Talib, they all agreed and supervised. Oh, of course, Ali ibn Abi Talib did not directly supervise it, but because it was written under the supervision of Ubay ibn Ka'b. And we know Ubay ibn Ka'b was a person who always consulted Ali ibn Abi Talib in everything in the matter of the Quran. So yes, of course, Amirul Mu'minin was quite happy with what happened at the time.
Thank you much indeed. Next Sunday, inshallah?
No, next Sunday I'm not here. Inshallah, the following Sunday. Okay. Thank you for mentioning.
Have a safe journey wherever you are going.
Thank you.
Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.